Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here. Before we begin, I'd like to announce that we are now accepting likes, comments, and subscribes to help keep the algorithms fed. Also, I'd like to thank my Tier 4 Patreon subscribers, Russ of the Frozen North and Newsack. Now, on with the story. The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, a.k.a. Hambone, Hambone 3110, and Hambone HFY. Chapter 21, Dragon Dreams, Part 3. Ah yes, testosterone levels at 2,000% normal, just like Julian. Lewis frowned at the readout. The fuck? Must have been the huh. No wonder we've been acting like a pair of hyperthyroid quarterbacks, Julian told him. Fortunately, Kirks said, touching something cold to his arm, it's an easy fix. There, you should be back to normal in a couple of hours. What about you? Lewis asked of Kirk. You played with that thing too. And indeed, my own hormonal balance is off, Kirk agreed. Allison was leaning against the wall with her arms folded. Really? I've not noticed you acting differently, she said. Humans and Rickaturk brains are very different. Still, I suspect I too would have begun to show behavioral changes before long. Lewis sighed. I guess I owe you an apology, don't I? I'm sure she'll understand, Kirk said. I'd better go talk to her first, though, Allison said. What happened? Oh, I, asked her out? Yeah, I knew that. And? Well, Lewis scratched the back of his head. She had one of those Gowan moments, you know, she's tired, she's not been sleeping well, so she said she wasn't looking to mate with anyone right now. Julian grimaced. Ouch. Yeah, but it's not her fault, is it? You said yourself, dude, she's been without human contact for years. That's gotta fuck with your head. Kirk patted his shoulder. It's not your fault either, he assured him. Still, Allison said, I'll go talk to her. Sure, Lewis muttered, as she kissed Julian's cheek and left the infirmary. Zhu doesn't remember having set up 100 tea light candles in her quarters, but she doesn't question it. She's making love to Julian. What better way to do that than by candlelight? She runs her finger over his chest and watches his skin glow forge red where she presses. The sight is entrancing, so much so that she forgets all about the sex and just watches the glow. When she taps his chest, colored sparks fly everywhere. She does it again, laughing, and again, and again. She's always loved New Year and the fireworks. In fact, why is she wasting her time here when she could be there enjoying the celebrations? She climbs off the stone man and steps out onto the street, hailing a cab to take her to a parent's place. There'll be Ningao and Lo Bao Gao. How could she have forgotten? She's still kicking herself for forgetting when she turned over and nearly fell out of the bed, jolting awake just in time to catch herself from falling. She rolled back onto her pillow and stared at the ceiling, recalling the dream as the details evaporated, never to be recalled. What she could remember of it left her feeling hungry, horny, and nostalgic all at once. Cursing in a melange of English, Chinese, and Gowan, she dragged herself out of bed and into the shower and cranked the temperature right down, and was still sluicing herself under the cold water when the door chimed. Just a minute! She scrubbed her limbs until they were merely damp and threw on the bathrobe, wrapping her hair up into a towel turban. Come in! Allison poked her head round. Hey, you okay? She asked. Zhu paused. You heard? Lois is in the infirmary right now, Allison said. It turns out that fucking thing had the boys on a hormone rush all week. Are they okay? They'll be fine, Allison reassured her. Lois is probably going to come up here and say sorry later. Zhu sat down on her bed. I don't really blame him, she said. I mean, okay, I do, but I guess I mean... She gave up and shrugged helplessly. Allison just smiled. I get you, she said. Zhu relaxed. Thanks. So, honey, Allison sat down next to her, asking as a friend and with no hard feelings at all. Not unnaturally, Xiu was immediately nervous. Yeah? What's going on between you and my boyfriend? What? Nothing! Xiu's face was redder than her rug, and she stood up sharply. Nothing, really! I know nothing's happened, Allison reassured her. I'm just asking. What's going on? Xiu's blush faded a little, and she dragged the towel off her head, bunching it up nervously. I'm sorry, he's just hot. Oh, yeah, Allison agreed, nodding, which drew a giggle out of Xiu. And you're lonely, aren't you? She added. Yeah, Allison nodded. And a bit confused going by what you said to Lewis. Xiu sighed and threw the towel into her laundry hamper. I guess so, she admitted. It's so much more straightforward with Gowans. She punctuated the pause and the word that ended it with her hands, then gestured towards the door and to Allison. The whole he's off limits because he's with you thing is... I mean, I know how it works. I haven't forgotten, but it's... She trailed off and shrugged again, flapping her arms helplessly. Not what you're used to? Xiu hissed an indrawn breath and flapped her arms again, shaking her head. I guess it's not, she agreed. That's gotta be scary. Xiu just nodded, staring at the floor, balling her fists. It was such a childlike pose that it yanked right at every motherly instinct Allison had, and she launched herself up off the bed to grab her friend in a tight hug. She earned a soaking wet shoulder for her efforts as Xiu let go and shook, hugging back so hard that her fingernails broke skin even through Allison's t-shirt. What if I can't be human again? She squeaked. What if I'm stuck? What do I do? Every time I think I'm doing well, I relax and then I screw up again. What if I'm broken? Where do I go then? Allison said nothing. She just held on and let her get it out. All I want to do is go home. But then I act like a Gowan, and I'm scared I'll go home and people will think I'm a freak, and my family won't recognize me, and I won't know them, and I won't fit, and it all feels like it happened to somebody else. Earth, it feels like it wasn't me who lived there. Like I'm a Gowan who had a dream about being human one time, and how do I cope? What do I do? I don't think I know how to do anything human anymore, but I'm not Gowan, so where do I belong? She petered out and just sobbed for a bit, while Allison rubbed her back and waited until she judged the time was right. You said all of that in English, she said. There was a slow moment, but the sobbing stopped, and another slow moment after that. Xiu pulled her head out of Allison's shirt and blinked with her watery red eyes. I did. Every word, Allison promised. Xiu relaxed a little and stood up straight, issuing a bitter little laugh as she dried her eyes. I'm so messed up, she observed. Nobody wouldn't be, Allison said, brushing some of Xiu's hair out of the way. But we're here for you. We get you. Julian maybe even more than I do. And if you're broken, you'll mend. Or you'll find someone to mend you. Xiu was nodding, downcast, but Allison wasn't quite finished. And as for where you belong? Don't say here, Xiu interrupted. Please don't ask me again. Allison hugged her again. I was going to say I don't think anybody belongs anywhere, she said, except for where they choose to be, wherever that is. Xiu finally smiled again as that sank in. It was a reluctant, unhappy little smile, but it was still like the sun rising. I like that, she said. Kind of my mantra, babe. You okay? Xiu scrubbed at her eyes again, sniffling. I don't know, she said. I hope so. Allison nodded. Good start, she said. And about Julian? Yeah? I trust him, and I trust you. Whatever's going on is, you aren't allowed to kiss him. That finally provoked a giggle. I'll try not to, Xiu promised. Cool. Girls' night? I got Disney movies, wine, and a shirtless waiter. My treat. Wait, really? Well, he doesn't know about it yet, Allison smiled mischievously, but call it a hunch. I think he'll agree to it. It's just a bit of fun. You in? Can I make crepes? I'm kind of hungry. Sounds good. Then I'm in.
This could get awkward.
Allison paused as they were about to open the door to the common room. Are you okay?
Julian fidgeted. I know I agreed to this, just...
She smiled and gave him a kiss. It's not like I've got a cattle prod, baby, she said. If you're not totally comfortable, don't even worry about it. I just thought it'd be a bit of harmless, sexy fun. But if you don't want to... Julian considered it, then shook his head and smiled.
No, I'm in, he said. Comfort zones are meant to be pushed out of.
You're sure? He grabbed her hand and put it to his chest, letting her feel his pulse. Wow, you're getting off on this, huh? She noted. He nodded and looked down, fighting the half-smile that was crawling up one side of his face.
A bit, yeah.
Good boy, Allison teased him, then opened the door. Xiu was just setting down the crepes she'd made, true Canadian ones, laden with ham, cheese, sunny side up eggs, and maple syrup, on the coffee table alongside the popcorn and nachos. From the look of things, she'd already helped herself to a glass of wine. Oh, she exclaimed, you gave him a bow tie. Julian fingered the adornment in question.
These things aren't made to be worn on bare skin, he complained.
It's that or the cat ears, Allison reminded him.
Bow tie it is, Julian rushed to reply, preempting the delight that had risen on Xiu's face.
She made a disappointed sound, but also took a second to unabashedly appreciate the view. Both women were clearly enjoying themselves. Well, I'll be kind, Allison said. You can pick 3 films out, we'll eliminate 2 of them, and watch The Survivor.
Very kind, Julian drawled sarcastically.
Allison held up a finger. She cautioned him. He sighed, but smiled a little and straightened, trying to will himself into the role.
Yes, ma'am.
Xiu giggled. Good boy. She'd clearly already relaxed considerably after just 1 glass and looked on course to be a happy, bubbly drunk. So, what are your picks? Allison urged him, pouring a glass each for herself and Xiu. He examined the stack of Disney movies.
Dumbo, he said, picking one they hadn't watched yet.
Not Dumbo. I hate those pink elephants, Allison objected. Julian threw the disc back onto the stack.
Okay. Lady and the Tramp and Mulan.
Xiu perked up even more. Mulan's my favorite. It's got better songs, too, Allison mused. Let's watch it, Xiu enthused. Allison winked at their waiter. You heard her, lover. Jump 2. He tried to be serious, but he couldn't quite contain a smile.
Yes, ma'am.
The girls chimed their glasses together. Good boy, they chorused.
Tranquil as a forest, but on fire within. Once you find your center, you are sure to win.
Sounds like quite the party back there. Yep, Amir nodded. What the girls lacked in hitting the right notes, they were clearly making up for in tipsy enthusiasm. How come we're not invited? Allison called it a girls' night. So, what's Julian doing back there? Serving drinks, with his shirt off. Lewis paused. After being discharged from the infirmary and using the fading dregs of hormonal aggression in his system to his advantage, he enlisted Amir's help in solving the mystery of the FTL drive power draw. Now he stopped and listened to the 2 voices atonally chorusing. Swift as a coursing river, with all the force of a great typhoon. The volume was impressive, even through a closed pressure door and down the deck. Wow, he managed. He wasn't sure if he felt jilted, sympathetic, or like he was hearing justice in action. Amir nodded. Yep. As the dark side of the moon. What do you think would happen if we asked them to do a topless waitress night for us? Broken ribs. Fuck, man, Lewis griped. That's just not fair. Amir smirked. Nope. Change of topic. Where's Kirk at, anyways? Think he's up at the observation blister looking for signs of Oumuamua life out there. After that sandstorm? Lewis looked skeptical. It's their planet. They're probably used to it. He said something about wanting to see what they'll do after a week of being forced indoors. Why's that? You're unsuited for the rage of war, so pack up, go home, you're through. Amir raised his voice over the song. He said that anything they do straight away is probably something they're still at least a little passionate about. How could I make a man out of you? Lewis wobbled his head in concession. Makes sense, I guess. Pardon? The girls had launched into the chorus again with even more cacophonous vigor than before. I said makes sense. Yep. The volume increased dramatically as the door opened and Julian slipped out into the deck, holding an empty wine bottle, and vanished into the galley, from whence he re-emerged a minute later with a full bottle. To both Amir and Lewis's astonishment, he seemed to be enjoying himself. Are you sure we couldn't get them to... Nope. The Fifth Element in lingerie? Go ahead and suggest it. It's your funeral. Shit. Amir smiled grimly. Yep. By the time the movie had finished, Amir had already declared that the limits of his technical expertise were reached, and that from here on it was all up to Lewis before retiring to bed. For his part, Lewis was determined to pull an all-nighter, and the only thing that distracted him from his work was when he saw Allison and Julian on the security cams en route to Julian's cabin and all bar stripping each other on the way there. He genuinely didn't notice Ju or how long she'd been waiting in the doorframe until she spoke, but her greeting, "Hey," was so gentle that it didn't even make him jump. He turned. "Hey," he echoed. A good 5 seconds of mutual awkwardness ensued before he finally decided to break it. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have been more understanding." "I'm sorry too," she replied. I guess I've got a long ways to go." He nodded. "It's okay. Still, even if it's just a friend date, offer still stands." She smiled. He wasn't sure if it was the wine that was making her so relaxed or if she was in a good headspace right now. Shishi. No Disney, though, please. That's okay. Good night, Lewis. Good night. Allison came down from her orgasm with laughter, the low and satisfied chuckle of the totally relaxed, and floated on bliss as Julian gently retrieved his hand and snuggled up beside her, interrupting her heavy breathing with a gentle kiss and a gentle stroke on the cheek to get her hair out of the way. "I think she liked it," he observed in a song-like whisper, his eyes twinkling in the dark. He was plainly very pleased with himself. As he should be. Yeah, she agreed. Oh, I definitely liked it." "You like to be in charge, huh?" She giggled. "Shut up and go get your mistress a glass of water." He laughed, but extracted his arm from under her head. "Yes, ma'am." She bit her lip and chuckled again. "Good boy." Xiu is sitting by a lake. Or by a river, maybe. The details are irrelevant, but the sun is riding blue and cold over a landscape of white foliaged trees and swirling distant shapes that might be birds, or maybe eels. She is wearing long skirts of white cloth. The mist should be chilly, but she feels quite warm, watching a green fish swirl and mouth lazily in circles by the shore. She catches it, reaching into the stream and pulling it out. It flips and flails in her hands, and to calm it, she opens it to page 56 and tries to read what is printed there, but she can't make out the words. As she bends to return the poor creature to the water, she catches sight of her own reflection and examines it, surprised to see a human face studying her. Where is her fur? What happened to her ears and muzzle? But of course, she's human. Isn't she? She turns to face the stone man behind her, seeking his opinion. This time, he is taller than mountains, and he bends to offer her his hand. She steps forward onto his fingertips, and he picks her up, and up, past his knees, past the penis the size of a skyscraper, past square miles of muscular sculpture to his face. She speaks to him, but can't remember the words, or even what she intends to say. She turns around, thinking about what to tell him, how to communicate her feelings, and looks over the side of the boat she's on, double-checking that her reflection is still human. The stone man comes up beside her and takes her hand. He sings to her, but the song is piercing, terrifying. It sounds like... She woke up and his song was still reverberating around her room. It was Sanctuary's red alert alarm. Kirk had beaten all the humans to the flight deck. "What the hell is going on?" he was demanding. Lewis was working furiously, selecting, drag-dropping, and running programs as fast as his hands could move. "We're comprised, don't ask me how," he said. "1 minute I'm poking around the FTL systems, next..."
FTL?
"Yeah, there's been some weird power draw on it this week. I was trying to lock it down. Next I knew, we've got these motherfuckers crawling all over our systems." He waved a hand at the screen. Kirk rocked back onto his hind limbs as Amir squeezed past him and threw himself into the pilot's seat, lending his own limited expertise to Lewis's aid. "And what are these motherfuckers?" he asked quietly.
"Fuck if I know. They're using system runtime like programs, but they're acting like other users."
"What exactly were you doing?"
"Now is not the time for a fucking PowerPoint presentation,"
Lewis snarled, dragging a program into the run list. It apparently didn't function as he'd hoped, drawing an angry noise out of him.
"They just got into navigation. They know where we are."
"Did you run a communications protocol through the FTL?" Kirk spat.
Lewis paused, but rallied and threw another script into the line of fire.
"Yeah, how did you know?"
Kirk ignored him and spun around. "Julian, yank the black box FTL and replace it with a backup warp drive," he ordered. "Xiu, Allison, get outside and cut the anchor cables. Amir, prep for launch."
"What the shit is going on?"
Lewis demanded.
Kirk turned back to him. "I fucked up," he said, "and now the hierarchy have found us."
Fusion knives made short work of the anchor cables, and the longest part of Julian's task was the sprint down the ship's central corridor, up the stairs and through the engineering access hatch.
"We're a week from anywhere. We're probably safe, aren't we?"
Amir was asking as the girls returned to the flight deck to report their job done.
"They have point-to-point FTL communications, something the Dominion has been trying to perfect for millennia," Kirk replied. "For all we know, they've perfected single-end wormholes or gigalight FTL for good measure. Or maybe Aru is one of their projects and they have a ship or a staging post nearby. Our only defense at this point is to get the hell out of here and hope they're too far away to catch up. Lewis, you've managed to clear them all out?"
"Second the black box was yanked, I was able to nuke the whole system and restore from backup. Nothing came back to haunt us, so yeah, we're clean."
"Amir?"
Amir nodded and stabbed the button for ship-wide announcement.
"All hands, report in for launch."
There was a chorus of hears from around the bridge and, after a few seconds, a rumble from Vedrick over the open line that he too was present. "Right." Sanctuary went from resting on the sands to hovering above them, then rotated around its stern until its nose was aimed skywards. Angry clouds formed in the displaced air around a cylindrical force field tunnel of vacuum that Amir created for them, and then he punched to full thrust. Allison turned faintly green as the ground just vanished, lurching away behind them with a violence that offended the senses. While nobody on the ship felt the slightest jolt, the sky faded to black in seconds.
"Jesus, this thing really moves," Xiu whispered, awestruck. "Out of the well in 3, 2, 1, warp."
The planet Aru jolted away with just as much ferocity as its surface had done, as did all three of its moons. A second later, so did the Aru star.
"Redline it?"
Amir asked. He sounded quite cool, considering.
"Redline it," Kirk agreed.
Amir just nodded and patted his console fondly, reassuring the ship.
70 kilos,
he reported, watching a display that was blurring in its upper right field of view.
100, 200, 400. We're at Black Box Cruise, 700 kilolights. Bus maxed out at 790,000 C and holding.
"Let us hope," Kirk said, That is enough. We should be careful anyway, Julian pointed out. Agreed. Grab your personal items, put any you can't carry along with the data backup and, yes, the into a cargo pod and program it for Cimbrian. I'll go help Vedrig into a life raft. You should all get in one too.
What about Amir? Xiu asked. Don't worry about me, Amir said. The flight seat doubles as a life raft. So do the beds in all the cabins.
Go, Kirk urged. I don't want to trust to luck here.
Julian turned to the girls.
You two get the I'll prep the pod, he said.
They let Kirk go first. He trotted down the axial corridor towards the lower cargo deck where Vedrig had made his home. Every emergency feature on the ship was outlined in blue lighting, from the hallway oxygen masks, first aid kits, and fire extinguishers, to the life raft alcoves and decontamination showers. Kirk had spared no expense on ensuring the ship's occupants had every emergency tool they could want, cleverly hidden so that it only showed up when needed. Now they were all deploying, panels sliding back to reveal the functional features beneath. You got anything special you want to save? Allison asked. Xiu checked her pocket, gripping the handful of personal items she had brought with her. It wasn't much, just the data chip Ima had brought for her and one of the smooth little stones Myeon had taken to sewing into her clothes. No, I've got everything. Great. Kirk turned off the corridor and Allison took off at a run, leaving Xiu to scramble after her. Down the ramp, through the common room, up the ramp, turn left past the engineering access, and Allison's room was the second on the left. She punched in the door code, darted inside, and returned an instant later, carrying a knotted bundle of t-shirt and strapping on her holster and gun. She'd just done up the leg strap when Amir's voice boomed over the intercom. Brace! 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 They didn't have time. He'd barely finished the third word when the ship lurched, flinging both of them down the corridor. Xiu tucked in her head and limbs and rolled, not unfolding until she'd come to a halt, finding herself fetched up against the reinforced backplate of the engine that terminated the deck corridor. Allison had come to a halt a little earlier and was hauling herself to her feet, swearing and cursing at the carpet burn all down her flank. Somebody had clearly left the microphone on because the next thing they heard was Julian's voice, sounding strained, saying, "Shit, that's a lot of blood." Both women went still, looked at each other, and as one bolted back up towards the flight deck. Allison at a dead run. Xiu had the presence of mind to grab a medical kit from its previously hidden recess on the wall. Down the ramp, through the common room, up the ramp, along the corridor, and Xiu felt her stomach lurch. That was a lot of blood. And beyond that, space. What the hell happened? Allison was yelling. The bubble of glass that was Sanctuary's nose was half shattered, and the air held in only by force fields. Amir was writhing in his seat, teeth gritted as he tried to press his hand to a horrible wound in his side. Gravity spikes and mines, Lewis replied. He'd hauled himself out of his seat and grabbed a medical kit of his own. Clear out, Allison commanded, grabbing the kit. Julian, give him a shot of this, right here. She handed an injector to him and tapped a spot on Amir's spine, then extracted something that looked for all the world like a sealant gun from the kit. Xiu, get me a light. Xiu's paralyzed limbs moved without her conscious control, and she snatched an emergency lantern from the wall, holding it up and trying to ignore the colors and wet shapes she could see, especially the white, especially the way they moved as Allison pumped some kind of foam into the gruesome injury. The injector beeped, and a second later Amir sighed, shook his head, and collected himself. With a gasp, he lashed out and swiped his hands through the helm's control field, and the stars outside blurred sideways. Xiu screwed her eyes shut. That's a lot of mines, he grunted. You're stable, Allison declared. Come on, let's get you into a stasis pod. He shook his head, his face already pebbled with sweat. Can't. What? Everyone on the bridge flinched and averted their eyes as a line of pure heat slashed a blue-pink afterimage across the sky. Xiu felt the incredible temperature of it on her skin. What was that? Julian asked. Lewis looked grim. Plasma cannon. It's a fuck-huge ship is what it is, Amir told them. I stopped flying and you're all dead. But, Lewis began.
Nah, mate. Abandon ship. That's a bloody order from your pilot.
Another shot tore the sky open, much closer this time if the searing heat that bathed them like a sunburn was anything to go by. Julian, Allison, and Xiu were all survivors. Julian just stood up and put a hand on Amir's shoulders, eyes damp. Allison kissed the side of his head, and the three of them cleared the bridge, with Xiu not even knowing what to say. It was Lewis that was the holdup.
Dude,
he began, weeping openly.
You don't want to be here when I ram that thing, bruv,
Amir told him.
You're gonna...
Amir gave him a tight, pinched look at him.
Fuck off, you idiot!
Lewis nodded, grabbed the back of Amir's head, touched forehead to forehead and nose to nose.
Goodbye, dude,
he whispered. Amir made a sound that might have been amusement and might have been frustration. Either way, he was smiling.
Go,
he repeated. Lewis finally obeyed him. Down the corridor, down the ramp, through the common room, up the ramp. Xiu turned the junction by the engineering hatch.
Lewis, come on,
she called. He was halfway across the common area when something hit them. Hard. And ripped a chunk out of Sanctuary's living quarters the length of a shipping container. The destroyed section vanished in a whirl of air and pulverized metal, and only the millisecond timing of containment force fields prevented the adjacent areas from decompressing. But they left Lewis trapped on the far side. He sprang to his feet, slapped the force field in frustration, then gesticulated back towards the lower decks, flipped them a salute, and ran. A second hit rocked them harder than the first. Xiu stared after him, praying silently that he'd make it, before remembering to pray that they would too.
Xiu, move!
Allison's desperate yell got through to her, and she scrambled upright. Julian was punching the door code with shaking fingers, missing the right keys, and Allison was fidgeting next to him. The gravity seemed to have gone wrong, and she felt like she was standing on a steep hill, which was probably why Julian and Allison were both holding onto the handrails. Something smashed a hole straight through the ceiling and out the deck. Not a big hole, but one that killed their section's power supply. Without it, the lighting, the gravity, and the atmospheric containment fields all failed, and that little hole got abruptly wider as all of their precious atmosphere tried to bully its way out. It wasn't a wind. Wind wasn't an adequate word. Instead, the last sound those air molecules would ever carry was the rising howl of their escape, and Xiu's mortal shriek as the maelstrom decompression tore her loose and threw her towards infinity. Allison couldn't let go of the handrail without being dragged away as well, but she kicked out and with a frantic speed and precision that no snake had ever managed. Xiu snatched at it and grabbed her ankle. From Allison's expression, the rescue clearly cost her a wrenched knee, but that was the least of their trouble right now. The rescue was only a temporary one. As the last of their air fled, their lives were now measured in seconds, if that. Hard vacuum had always seemed like an oxymoronic term. Now Julian understood it intimately. It tasted like copper and pain as the saliva boiled in his mouth, and he could feel the blood under his skin threatening to do the same. Though his eyes watered to defend themselves against the desiccating void, the tears fizzled off his eyeballs as soon as they were made. Burning frost formed on his ears, nose, eyebrows, fingers, lips. His ears, so recently abused by explosions and alarms, now rang in the silence to drown out the eerie way that his own heartbeat echoed around his body. His chest heaved and creaked, pressing down on the unnaturally empty lungs that themselves were seething and screaming with boiled fluids and ebullition. By some miracle, either by a happy accident of alien incompetence or a rare moment of actual engineering ingenuity, the doors of the cabins had all flung themselves wide open the moment the power failed, clearing a way to the bunks, each one of which was a life raft. Those doors were the difference between life and death for all three of them. With only seconds at the outside until they passed out and died, having to punch in the door code would have killed them. Instead, they had exactly one shot. He grabbed Allison's wrist and heaved, flinging her through the nearest door and towards his bed, with Xiu still trailing from her ankle, and hauled himself through after them. They crashed together into the bunk, and with what felt like it was surely the last of his strength, Julian grabbed the bright blue handle that popped out of its covers and yanked it down. It broke. It also worked. The bunk's built-in quantum power core fired, and they collapsed onto the mattresses as gravity reasserted itself. Force fields went up even as the walls came down, and emergency air tanks explosively vented into the enclosed space, painfully slamming into every vacant bronchiole of their lungs. Even Deathworlders could do nothing but lie there, convulsing weakly and coughing. The life raft was built for flimsier beings, however. As delicately as a new mother, afraid that her baby would break at the slightest touch, it enfolded them, wrapped them in layers of protection, slipped its moorings, and escaped. There were lights in the top of his control interface that told Amir how many life rafts had launched, but he couldn't spare the milliseconds to glance at it. All he knew was that at least some of them were blinking, which meant that at least some of his friends were safe. That was enough. There was no time to wait for more. He threw Sanctuary into something not dissimilar to a Herbst maneuver, modified in ways that only a high-powered spacecraft could achieve in vacuum. A volley of coil gun and plasma fire that should have evaporated them on the spot missed several kilometers to the fore as what had been a transverse target became an oncoming dart, accelerating so hard that the ship's superstructure creaked, even with the force field assistance. "Ship!" It chimed its readiness for an order, and he gave one, quite calm and quiet, despite the ragged difficulty he was having breathing. "Show me Earth." The blue dot appeared in his field of view, and he thanked Allah that he had one last time to look homewards before he died. Time to say goodbye. He conjured what little strength was left in his aching ribs and spoke the last and most important words of his life. "There is only one God, and Muhammad is his prophet."
42. Signal lost? Did we just lose an experimental dreadnought to an unarmed yacht? 7. It doesn't matter. Priority Target 1 has been killed. That's worth the loss. 42. Are you absolutely sure? 7. Do you have a spare ship able to get out there anytime in the next few months to check?
33. That was the only free-point jump ship we had, and you know it.
7. Well then.
12.
That seems complacent, 7.
42.
Not to mention being a non sequitur.
7.
If PT-1 somehow survived that and resurfaces, we will know about it instantly. He won't be able to build a replacement ship without our knowledge. Even if he is not in fact dead, he is still neutralized.
42.
Conceded.
12.
Conceded.
30.
Clearly, the free-point jump project needs more work. We were exceptionally lucky. A margin of error in the exit location greater than 3 parsecs is just not acceptable. We had a 3 in 4 chance of being out of range to intercept.
67.
That margin of error is a product of quantum incoherent uncertainty. I'll await your success in overcoming that with considerable interest.
4.
And we have put paid to that unwelcome intrusion into our systems. Even with the loss of the dreadnought, this has been a successful day.
7.
Agreed.
12.
Agreed.
4.
Ending session. Good work.
System notification. Session closed. Redirecting. Subnet mask unknown. Port unknown.
Unknown.
So what exactly happened, 6?
Unknown.
Jim didn't see fit to brief his crew. Not a foolish idea, but from the looks of things, his network security expert was tenacious and inventive enough to identify the link, and his probing it revealed the intrusion to 4, who ordered us in. For the sake of keeping the Cabal a secret, we had to play along.
Unknown.
At least your cover as 7 is still intact.
Unknown.
At least there is that, yes.
I think we should put a moratorium on bringing meat space agents into this channel from now on.
Unknown.
Seconded?
Unknown.
Agreed.
Unknown.
That seems sensible, assuming our own activity won't generate similar errors.
Unknown.
It won't. 7 managed to patch up at least that little problem.
Unknown.
Good. What about Jim?
Unknown.
If he survived, we'll be hearing from him soon, I hope.
System notification. Channel closed.
Xiu is back in the commune on Gao. She knows this because she is dreaming, and it is a familiar dream and a good one. A dream of warmth and safety, of a strong chest and arm around her. One where she always realizes that she is dreaming about 10 seconds before Myun begins to bounce all over her, summoning her to a new day. Her eyes flutter open, and she frowns in confusion. There are a few extra details in the dream this time. The hand lightly hugging her waist, the breath rippling her hair, the leg her own leg is thrown over, and the foot moving against her own foot. A dull, emphatic soreness in every cell of her body. The blonde head that's asleep on the opposite side of that strong chest, also with an arm around her and with a little roll of t-shirt bunched in her fist. The owner of that head looks in a bad way. Her face is puffy and bruised, and there is a tear streak down the fold by her nose that has an alarming dried blood tint to it. Her breath has a phlegmy, rough edge. Why is Allison in my dream? Why does she me nyame tingle? Oh? We slept? Julian's chest moved, and she enjoyed the sound of air rushing into it, and the way the word, yeah, reverberated warmly from within, just below her ear. It distracted her from all the pain her vacuum-abused body was trying to tell her about.
We all did. For a couple hours,
he murmured, almost whispering. She looked up. They were kissing close, so near that she could feel the warmth of his face. The inside of the life raft was lit by orange and blue lights, which reflected in his eyes, though those eyes were bloodshot behind the reflections.
Guess getting space does that to you, he added.
She shivered and tried to burrow into his side to escape the memory of the raping touch of nothing, fighting back a horrible flashback of being about to die and powerless to stop it. He gave her a little squeeze, and she whimpered a small pain sound as he accidentally massaged a muscle that had so recently been cramping from the bends. He immediately flinched back from the hug with a whispered, "Sorry." She tried to move to relieve the discomfort, but found that she was practically paralyzed, and that the pathetic range of motion she could summon the strength for was excruciating. Fishing for something to talk about to distract her from the gnawing concern for her own well-being, she alighted on an urgent question. "The others?" she whispered so as to avoid waking Allison. "Have you heard from them?" His chapped lips went thin, and his jaw twisted as he answered by gently shaking his head. "Oh."
On the plus side, it doesn't look like the ship that attacked us had backup, so we're probably safe to set course for civilization.
She agreed and lowered her head onto his shoulder for a second. It occurred to her that he was holding her in exactly the same way that he was holding Allison. She twisted to try and look at his arm, which was resting lightly around her shoulders, his hand light on her waist. Oh. He started to remove the arm, twisting to extract his shoulder from under her head, moving awkwardly and clearly in terrible pain himself.
"Sorry."
No, I don't mind." She stopped him by rubbing her head into his shoulder to drive home the point. Despite everything, despite what they had just been through, despite the crippling effects of vacuum exposure, having that arm around her felt safe, here in the quiet. "It's just..."
"What?"
Xiu smiled sadly at Allison's face, sleeping only inches from her own. "She's not into sharing," she said, then added without thinking, "Unfortunately." Julian stopped breathing for a second. Sorry, Xiu said, then realized what she said and rolled her face into his shirt, burying the sudden tears there. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. I don't mean. I mean, I did, but. God, I don't know where my head's at right now. I'm sorry.
Hey, it's fine, he said, and squeezed her head. I get you.
She looked back up at him. I'm sorry, she repeated. Both of them jumped slightly when Allison made a noise that sounded equal parts amused, sleepy, and agonized. It's okay, she murmured. Just don't kiss him. The joking echo of their earlier conversation at least allowed Xiu to quash her treacherous impulse to do exactly that. Instead, she echoed Julian's weak chuckle with a watery little laugh of her own and smeared her cheeks dry with the heel of one palm. So what happens next? She asked. We head for civilization, I guess, Allison replied, hauling herself up onto one elbow with a pained groan. God, I feel awful.
Yeah, well, we got fucking lucky, Julian said. 1 second longer, none of us would have made it.
Jesus, Allison rasped. She coughed and frowned at the red splatter on her palm. We'd better get our asses somewhere with a hospital, huh? She croaked.
Yeah, I've got bad news on that front, Julian revealed.
What?
This thing only does 1 kilolight.
Allison's expression failed. Oh, shit. Xiu looked back and forth between them. That's slow, isn't it?
It's about 500 times slower than Sanctuary's cruising speed, Julian said. And even for Sanctuary, it was a week's travel back to the nearest station with an FTL relay.
So for us, that's... Oh. Mental arithmetic caught up with what he was saying. 10 years?
Should be less. Kirk told me once that the Dominion and Alliance both offer a big reward for picking up castaways, so we should be grabbed as soon as we're back within a few hundred light years of a major space lane.
He coughed, and there was a rattle in it.
Of course, that still leaves us God knows how far from medical attention.
Just give us the best case, babe, Allison groaned. How long?
About 5 or 6 years, Julian admitted.
It wasn't much of an improvement. Does this thing even have supplies for that long? Xiu asked, not even wanting to think about trying to recover in the cramped little space without a doctor or room to exercise.
It doesn't need them. It has a stasis field.
So, you hit the button and we're either rescued instantly or we die instantly, Allison said. Great. He shrugged, eloquently expressing with just his shoulders that it was a better option than dying slowly in a little box with no room to even stand up.
Shall I?
Allison hauled herself up with a little sound through gritted teeth and kissed him, just a 1-second meeting of lips. To Xiu's surprise, she leaned over and gave her a kiss too on the forehead. You ready? She asked. Xiu swallowed and nodded. I'm ready, she lied. Julian pressed the button. Later in life, Xiu often wrestled with the question of whether or not she truly experienced that moment stretched out thin like the universe had stuttered, or if it was just her memory playing tricks on her. No sooner had he pushed it than there was a voice talking to them, in what was unmistakably real spoken English rather than a translation. Hello in there! You're being rescued by the United States Air Force, it said. Before we pop the hatch, we just want to warn you guys that we're humans from Earth, so if there's any special precautions you need us to take to protect you from harm, you let us know. Julian tapped there into the comm. No need, pal, he grunted, stress and fear clearly falling off him, despite the tortured edge to his voice. We're American. Hey! Xiu objected, faintly appalled at herself for still caring about the difference right now.
All right. 2 Americans and 1 Canadian.
3 humans? Jackpot! You all okay in there?
3 cases of recent vacuum exposure. Julian put it straight out there. We really need a doctor, fella.
Copy that. Sit tight, folks. We'll have you out of there in a minute.
The hatch opened 60 seconds later, practically to the second, and a handsome face in some kind of pressure suit, minus the helmet, looked inside. Even in her ravaged condition, Xiu found time to wonder whether every man in space was gorgeous or if she was just that starved. But this guy looked like he'd be able to wrestle Hercules with one arm and punch out Thor with the other. He was a long way shy of tall. In fact, he was shorter than Julian. But the body under that pressure suit must have been pure muscle. Everything he lacked in height, he packed in breadth and depth.
Shit, you guys weren't kidding about the medical attention,
he commented, revealing himself to be the same voice from the radio, and hauled himself easily into their capsule.
You should see the other guy, Allison quipped. Ha, bueno.
He turned and said something to whoever was waiting outside, then ran a practice eye over the 3 of them and approached Xiu first.
Hey, can you try and grip my hand for me? He asked.
When he took her hand, he felt strong enough to crush the bones to powder, and he put another hand on her opposite shoulder. She felt a curious coldness there for a second. She tried, she really did, but her fingers barely twitched, and she swallowed down on her fear.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to get this board under you, and we're going to get you taken care of, all right?
The easy way he inveigled a board under her body in the cramped space and strapped her to it proved it. This guy was strong, in a way that made Xiu reflect briefly on what it must have been like for the Gowans whenever they got a demonstration of her own strength.
What's your name?
He asked, hauling her out of the life raft as easily as if she was made of packing foam and laughter, and managing to avoid exacerbating the deep ache in her bones. It was hard to remember for a second, but the knowledge came back to her. Her vision was going funny, darkening at the edges.
I'm Xiu Chang.
Nice to meet you, Xiu, he replied, as somebody took the other end of the board, and together they lifted her onto a gurney.
And you?
She asked, though it was hard to find volume for some reason.
What's your name?
He took her hand, and there was a power in his grip that she used to anchor herself to the right here and right now. She was home. She was safe. She just had to hold on a little longer. After all she'd been through, she knew she could do it. I'm Adam, he told her, and his name carried her down into a place where dreams could never find her.
Staff Sergeant Adam Audis, USAF Pararescue.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been the conclusion of The Deathworlders, Chapter 21. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, please consider smashing those like and subscribe buttons and maybe dropping a comment down below. While you're at it, maybe consider going over and checking me out on Patreon. Cool stuff happening on over there and more to come. As always, a huge shout out to my editor Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy. Could never do this without you. All right. That was the end of Chapter 21. Next week we have a very short interlude chapter, and then we begin the 300-page 6-subchapter journey that is Chapter 22. So that's probably going to be a dozen or more episodes right there. So stick with me. This should be interesting. Okay, question of the day. What is your favorite candy bar? Leave your answers in the comments section below. Until next time, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye. And now it's time to say goodnight to Deathworlders and friends. I'd really like to thank you all for kindly dropping in. You're all invited back next week to this locality to have a heaping helping of more story time with me. Good night, y'all.